We have that story of Chicago suing Glock and even Highland Park suing Smith & Wesson, and we're seeing stories of other states going out to sue the firearms industry for a variety of reasons, and even recent statements from gun control groups pushing for more such lawsuits, saying that firearms are dangerous and firearms industry actors need to be held accountable. Well, with Bishop on Air, we've been tracking the lawsuits against the firearms industry, especially in the state of Illinois, where they passed the firearms industry liability law that's currently being challenged in the federal courts. So I chatted with U.S. Lawshield's Kirk Evans about that and a whole host of other things. And we started the conversation discussing lawsuits against the firearms industry, where these come from, where they're going, and how they could possibly play out. So conversation I had with Kirk Evans on Friday.
Sure, definitely. So up until the recent law, which we phrase it in other states, they allowed nuisance lawsuits against the gun industry. Up until these new laws, new state laws, the gun industry was protected by what's called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. That act did actually not protect the industry nearly as much as everyone would think. If you are a normal person hunting, out in the woods, not doing anything wrong, and because of a manufacturing defect, the shotgun had exploded in your face, that law did not protect the gun industry at all. You could still bring a lawsuit against the manufacturer. But what it did protect the gun industry from was nuisance lawsuits that said, hey, just because some bad guy did something bad and illegal with the gun, you can't go run off and sue the gun industry. That was what the federal statute says. But now a number of states, Delaware, Colorado, Hawaii, Washington, Illinois, New Jersey, have passed these lawsuits that allow the states to go after the gun industry for various items in the manufacturing, distribution, advertisement, and all of that. And yes, the states have gone full bore. Chicago, the big one is Chicago suing Glock, but there are a number of others. There have been a couple challenges so far in Delaware and New Jersey. They challenged those laws, and the challenges were dismissed, meaning that these nuisance lawsuits can go forward against the gun industry. In California, a federal judge has actually blocked the law, but that's obviously going up on appeal. And Illinois, we're certain to see this go, multiple challenges, and particularly in all the existing lawsuits. And those will go up on appeal and eventually work their way up to some final decision down the road.
So clearly, this is a contentious issue where you've got the law in Illinois allowing for actions against gun manufacturers like Glock. But again, that particular law allowing those actions is being challenged in federal courts in the Southern District. But there's all kinds of other gun laws in the state of Illinois that are facing challenges in federal court, something Kirk Evans from U.S. Lawshield spells out all the different challenges there are, including the challenge against Illinois' gun and magazine ban.
No, sure. So there's a whole bunch of other states, and exactly what is playing out in Illinois is playing out now in California, Washington, Oregon, New York. So none of this is, quote unquote, unusual. The deal is it probably will all be settled by the U.S. Supreme Court at one time. But there's two grounds on which the U.S. Supreme Court usually takes cases. One is if there are conflicting rulings from the various circuits. So if Illinois, got up to the Seventh Circuit or California got up to the Ninth Circuit, and there were differing rulings, then the U.S. Supreme Court might take up that case. Here, all of the activity is occurring in sort of gun unfriendly jurisdictions, so we may not even get conflicting rulings. But the other ground for which the U.S. Supreme Court can take up these cases if it's an unusually important issue. And so once we have a number of rulings at the various circuit court levels, if there's a conflict, the U.S. Supreme Court can take it. If it determines that this is an unusually important issue, it can also take it. The big proviso there is, we went about 10 years between major Second Amendment Supreme Court cases. So I do not want folks to get entirely optimistic that they're just going to, necessarily take one of these cases on importance. It might be more likely if there are conflicting rulings.
And those conflicting rulings, obviously, we saw out of the Southern District of Illinois and the Northern District of Illinois, where you had the Northern District on preliminary issues say that the state was likely to succeed, but the Southern District issued a preliminary injunction saying that the plaintiffs would likely succeed, and that, on preliminary grounds, went to the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, where they then said that the state had a likelihood of succeeding, and now you have the preliminary requests to the U.S. Supreme Court still standing by. And we also, last week we reviewed just the overview of the state's response to the U.S. Supreme Court in the Barnett case on preliminary issues. And I mean, they essentially said that the case isn't right yet. It's still percolating, and the U.S. Supreme Court shouldn't intervene right now. But you have the Southern District moving forward, and as we've gotten indication from some of the plaintiffs' attorneys, they fully expect the lawsuit on the merits to continue with a trial sometime starting in the second week of July. So we'll be watching that Southern District case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. And Kirk Evans with U.S. Lawshield really does kind of look at this difference here between the preliminary request of having the U.S. Supreme Court intervene with what's going on in the Southern District attacking the law on the merits. And there's an important distinction there, Kirk says.
Yeah. Yes, and thank you. That's a huge distinction that a lot of people don't pick up on. So, the Supreme Court actually denied ruling in one of the Illinois cases, and so a lot of folks, you hear that and go, "Oh, that's over with." The challenge to the Illinois laws is over. No, that was just on a preliminary injunction. And, the U.S. Supreme Court does not very often, in fact, very, very rarely steps in on preliminary injunctions. In fact, 99% of the time they wait for the case to go all the way through trial, have all the discovery, evidence, a final ruling by the judge or the jury, and then they wait for the Intermediate Court of Appeals to do sort of a final ruling. And so you're right, we haven't even hit that stage yet. So that's coming down the pike, and it is more important because an easy out for the U.S. Supreme Court is to say, no, this is a minor procedural process. Let's wait until we get the full ruling from the court below.
So we'll see what the Southern District of Illinois does moving forward on the merits of challenging the state's gun and magazine ban. And while the various laws, including the FOID card law, are being challenged, there's all kinds of other proposals at the State House. You've got measures looking to expand background checks. You've got measures looking to require training, require local law enforcement give you permission to buy a gun, even expansion of the firearms restraining order, saying that police have to confiscate firearms if somebody is the subject of a restraining order, instead of that subject turning over their firearms to somebody else qualified to have firearms. So all of these different measures we haven't really seen move through the legislature, but it's still early in spring session. We've got about 4 solid weeks left of session. After this week, they're off, but they can come back and do all kinds of things. Kirk Evans from U.S. Lawshield, he also spells out just some of the other various proposals that he's hearing and reading about.
Sure. So the last one you mentioned there is House Bill 4469, and it's every person on the face of the earth wants a domestic abuser who might have a gun and use it against an abused spouse. We want that person to be stopped, right? Everybody does. But there's overkill, and that's what you have to watch out for and make sure that everyone's rights are protected. So 4469 says that basically a spouse can walk in without any notice and without allowing an opportunity to be heard and get an order that in the old days used to say, hey, other spouse, hey, wife or husband, you have to turn over your guns to someone else who has a firearms owner ID card while you have this restraining order. Well, the new proposal is not only that, you have to turn them over to law enforcement, and the police have to go out and seize those weapons before you've ever had an opportunity to appear and be heard. So that is very, very dangerous. And I will say, anecdotally, in other states, we have seen it very, very common in divorce cases to use this as a weapon against the person you're fighting in the divorce with. So great, great idea, well intentioned, but this just rife with abuse. That it's just a very dangerous law that, if you can inject the right constitutional protections, certainly has some merit, but right now it looks awful dangerous. A couple of the other proposals are the guns at polling places, and I just bring that up because it's kind of unusual. So a number of what you would perceive as heavily regulated states, where guns are regulated very, very heavily, don't have any laws on the books about guns at polling places. But states where you would think, it's the Wild Wild West, actually do have laws that say there's no guns at polling places. But there's currently a proposal to ban guns at polling places. I did some research, and I have not seen a shooting, or at least I cannot find a shooting at a polling place since the 1800s in the United States. So I'm not sure where we're going with this law, but it's just kind of interesting and strange that that Illinois didn't already have this, and for instance, Michigan does not have such a law either, and they're trying to pass one. And the more training requirement, I will say that this is always a matter of underkill, overkill. There are definitely folks that need more training. We have seen it all around the country. There are folks, brand new gun owners that frankly don't know what they're doing and, should get more training. There are other folks who've been hunting with their dad since they were 4 years old, or, served in the military, 12 years in Iraq. Why does that person need to go get more training just to have a gun in their house? So again, underkill, overkill. But those are some of the big ones we're seeing at the legislature right now.
So we'll be watching closely with the Illinois State House to see if any of those things advance. I will say that the deadline Friday for the House to pass bills out of the House, nothing like that came out. But there's still time for them to take a shell bill, which is an empty bill, gut it, and then fill it with something else, and then pass that. It's what they did with the firearms ban and the magazine ban. It's what they've done in previous legislatures with very controversial legislation in the final days of the legislature before they passed something. But we're hearing from Kirk Evans. He's with U.S. Lawshield, and I wanted him to take some time just to explain what U.S. Lawshield is.
So the big, what we do is provide legal defense for self-defense. That's sort of half the picture. If you're ever forced to defend yourself with any legal weapon, we'll provide you with an attorney, start to finish, all the way through trial and any appeals, for just a small monthly fee. But the other half of it is you get access to educational materials, and you're allowed to call in and speak to the attorney in your state with any legal questions you might have. And so, for example, where you see on the news, all these weird, confusing terms that an injunction was granted, but a stay was issued, and there's no bar, and that case has been remanded. The average person sitting there going, "Holy cow, what in the world do I do?" I got a 14, round capacity magazine for my handgun, but I heard 10 rounds for rifles. Anyway, under our program, you can call in, and there is no limit to the number of calls or time that you want to spend with the attorney in your state on the phone, figuring out what the law is, what you need to do, and how you need to stay on the right side of the law.
And I asked him also about this proposal from State Representative John Cabello, who we heard last week during the Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day. He talked about a series of legislation that he filed and that has support of Republicans. One in particular is a stand your ground law for Illinois. And I was curious how U.S. Lawshield would interact with such a law if ever a law was to pass. And let's not be misunderstanding about this. Illinois is a state with Republicans as the super minority. There's supermajority Democrats that will not advance this type of legislation, a stand your ground law. And of course, John Cabello, being a police officer and a state representative, talked about how law enforcement want to be there to serve and protect. They can't always be there, but you should not have to face a lawsuit if you want to protect yourself and your family. So he's proposed a stand your ground law. We heard just briefly about that, but I wanted to get Kirk Evans's take on such laws.
Sure. No, it helps. We'd recommend, being a subscriber to our service regardless, but a stand your ground law can help to prevent second guessing by what we would say would be an overly aggressive prosecutor that basically prevents someone from arguing that you should have retreated and you should have retreated before using force or deadly force to defend yourself. And there are a number of circumstances where it is either dangerous or impossible or impractical or a split-second decision, and you don't want a prosecutor or district attorney arguing that you should have retreated when you were just defending yourself or your loved ones.
So clearly some interesting thoughts to be had about proposed Illinois legislation and all the litigation that's going on. Appreciate Kirk Evans from U.S. Lawshield joining me to talk about that on Friday, and me having the ability to share it with all of you this morning. It's Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning with Bishop on Air.